for us, and I can't speak for all venture capital funds, I think it's always been the idea of how do we create positive change in the world through the investments that we make. And, you have to think about this as a very long-term process. So we're looking for those macro changes that would allow us to do things completely differently. This exponential change, exponential impact, both financial impact, obviously, as a venture capital firm, but also human impact of things that would drive big changes in the world.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley in partnership with Leumi Tech, sponsored by Homeward Ventures, Hippo Insurance, Upwest Labs, Synergy Global, Hillel at Stanford, Leap, Birthright Excel, Serona Partners, and in media partnership with C-Tech. I am so incredibly excited for this episode. Meet Dror Berman, the founding partner at Innovation Endeavors, which he co-founded with Eric Schmidt. He invests in early-stage startups that are driving exponential rates of change in their industries, leading to a super evolution. Dror has invested in over 100 different companies from seed through Series B. He led the firm's investments in Uber, SoFi, Planet, Zimmergen, Freenome, Blue River Technologies, and others. Before becoming an investor, he was a team leader of R&D at NICE Systems. He earned an MBA from Stanford Graduate School of Business and a Bachelor's of Science in Computer Science from Ben-Gurion University. He is an ML7 associate at Creative Destruction Lab and a member of the steering committee of Israel Collaboration Network. Welcome, Dror. Dror Berman, welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much for inviting me to I have to tell you, it's one of the most beautiful offices I've seen. We're in the middle of Palo Alto and California Avenue, overlooking Stanford in one direction with the beautiful trees. The energy is amazing. We're on the third floor right now. There's still a roof above us and there's more offices downstairs. Really just an inspiring location. And I think it fits for the vision and the mission that you're on with Innovation Endeavors. That you started 10 years ago with Eric Schmidt, of course. Looking at the future in a bit of a different light. Dror, tell me a little bit about yourself and what is IE?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me on the show. I've been a great fan, big fan since you started it, and it's so exciting to see how much has been done over the last year on 20-Minute Leaders. So thanks for having me on this podcast. So maybe a little bit about myself. I'm from Israel originally, as you know by now. I have a technology background growing up. I then moved to spend a few years on the special forces side. So I guess for a few years I was a monkey that carried technology on his back, and then concluded it was much better actually to build stuff. So went back to study computer science and bioinformatics. Tried my luck as an engineer for a few years in Israel before concluding I wanted to do something slightly different, and ended up coming here to get my MBA actually just across the street.
Literally across the street.
Literally across the street. So it's, I came like everybody else that comes to Stanford. I came with the idea that I'll spend a couple of years studying, getting my MBA in my case, and then maybe work for a couple of years and then go back. But that never really worked out that way. We ended up, my wife and I ended up staying here. It's been almost 15 years now. And 3 kids later, we're quite happy. It's been a phenomenal journey and a great adventure, which was really what I was looking for when I came here.
Right.
About a decade ago, I ended up partnering or meeting Eric Schmidt, who was one of my professors at Stanford and was then the CEO of Google. We started working together in 2009, and in 2010, we got excited about this idea, about this concept of what we call the super evolution that you just mentioned. We recognized at the time, after having a lot of deep discussions, that the world was changing, and it was changing very, very quickly. And while we were accelerating technology in many different ways and domains, these technology advances were not necessarily advancing a lot of the problems that were really important for us back then, but also as we hypothesized the problem would be important for us over the next few decades. We were looking at some of the bigger things that we would need to solve over the next 20, 30 years, anything from dealing with a much bigger population and how do we feed this growing population, thinking about how do we accelerate the way we think about life sciences, both on the therapeutic side as well as diagnostics, to deal with some of the pandemics that we knew back then that would sort of come back often and again and again that we would need to deal with, as well as thinking about climate change, obviously, and things that we would need to do in order for us to live in a world that was livable, I guess, in that.
But I have a question for you, Dror. You know, everything that you're just mentioning, it's fascinating, and obviously these are things that we need to be tackling. But sitting where you were 10 years ago with Eric, what was different then about the way that you're approaching these problems? Because these are problems that we hear politicians talking about them. And if we ask what are the urgent problems in the world, what is lacking still in our industry as we're talking about these problems?
Yeah, I think as we've sort of spent a lot of time thinking about those problems, recognize that one of the key issues that was preventing us from solving those problems was the innovation cycles that we were using as humanity to actually advance innovation in those domains. Essentially, in a lot of those domains, you'd have a scientist or a group of scientists that would work together, come up with a hypothesis of what they wanted to test or what they wanted to do, then would essentially build this experiment, run it, and then see what came back on the other side, and then mostly use the success of what worked rather than everything that didn't work as well to essentially design the next set of experiments. And obviously, you're always limited by the number of scientists that you can have, by the amount of time it takes to run an experiment and so on. So everything was pretty serial and incremental and slow. And in some of those industries that were very important, if you think about, the life sciences world, for example, it would sometimes take decades to actually go through a step function improvement to find something new, right? And it would take, increasingly actually over the last 10 years, it's now taking us twice the amount of time and twice the amount of money to bring a new drug to market.
Wow.
So we knew that if you forecast this into the future, this was just not sustainable. We couldn't really be in a place where we're not innovating quickly enough to solve some of the problems. And 2020, or the last year and a half, as much as they've been really hard for all of us, they've also been great in the sense that it really highlighted a lot of those things that need to be done. Right? I mean, anything from dealing with the pandemic, of course, and having this need to come up with a solution in months or weeks, rather than wait decades or wait a few years until we have a vaccine in place. Right? We had to innovate faster. The folks that live here in California have all felt the smoke that came up as we had huge fires around California. It became an annual thing now. It's not just a one-off. It was happening every summer over the last few years. So everybody recognized that this is things are different. We have to solve things now in a very different way, and we have to move faster. And maybe the last example there would be even cities and governments. And we think about cities and government making decisions. Obviously we all think about the slowest moving entities in the world that need to take years or decades to react. Over COVID, they all understood that they have to move within time frameworks of sometimes 24 hours or even less to actually react to something that is going on and make a decision. So they're all increasingly looking for ways to innovate faster, make decisions faster, and hopefully make the right decisions as well.
10 years, 150 investments, 20 unicorns. If by looking at, the portfolio companies, I get excited. And the reason I get excited is because you're looking at vastly different industries, from agriculture tech like Plenty and Afresh, to we're looking at space technology, to satellite imagery, to autonomous fleet, to DevSecOps. I mean, really across the spectrum. But what the connecting dots among all of them, from my perspective, is this idea of looking at really bold ideas that if they work, are positioned to change the way we think about this industry. And now you've announced your next fund, a $500 million fund. And I love that first sentence that you wrote on the Medium post, because that sentence was, I think, that we now have there's an urgency to promote positive change, right? And that was really inspiring. Tell me a little bit about, where is this urgency that you're feeling? Now, you mentioned this a little bit before, but in the context of the last 10 years as well.
Yeah, I think that I've always been an optimist, and I think that my role as an investor is to be an optimist, right? So in spite of all those challenges we talked about earlier, we recognized, Eric and I, this is back in 2010, and since then that's the work we've been working towards, is that we can now solve a lot of those problems. We can now start implementing or applying technology to actually move faster in a lot of those domains. And that's sort of what kept me excited about the role I've been doing. Is I'm in a position now to help a lot of those people who have those huge visions and those big dreams to essentially exercise those dreams and build those kind of companies that change the world. And what really made us optimists at that time was this idea of the super evolution, right? We came up with the thesis that, if you look at if you look at technology at that time, and even increasingly now, we were just really coming up to a space where there was certain categories of technologies that were emerging and converging to allow us to move faster in a lot of those markets that I mentioned. One of those was instrumentation and data, right? The ability to now capture data, mostly in the physical, and increasingly also in the biological world, that was really never captured before, and capture huge amounts of data. It's just a sort of anecdotal data. We can now essentially instrument almost every aspect of the physical world, and increasingly a lot of different aspects of the biological world, such that we can understand what's going on.
Right.
The second thing was computation, and really having this ability to now take large amounts of data and run compute on them, whether it's in the cloud or increasingly at the edge. And if you think about, and I know you're an expert in AI and machine learning, we can now take all this data, digest it, and infer insights and recommendations in a way that was never possible before as well. So we can do this now, maybe 100x or 1000x better, faster, cheaper than even just a few years ago. And this was groundbreaking at the time, and even more so is the case today. And then the third part was this idea of engineering, advanced engineering, the advances we were seeing in engineering, both across automation and robotics in the physical world, but also this idea that we could now engineer the biological world. So essentially, if you think about it in a computer science context, we could now read, process, and write back into the physical and biological world in a way that wasn't possible before. And for us, what we recognized was this idea that this allows us now to essentially take those innovation cycles that I talked about earlier, put them now in the context of a completely new architecture. We can have machines at the center of the cycle, designing, building, and testing different hypotheses at a completely different scale, but also the fraction of the time and cost we were all used to. So we can now run 1000x experiments or 1000x more experiments in some of those industries at 1/1000th of the cost and time. Right? So we can essentially collapse time in sort of the way we innovate. Right? And that was groundbreaking concept for us, because we recognize that if you now think about it and thinking about this machine learning concept of closed loop learning, where we can now learn from all the different experiments, also the 99% of
accelerates learning. Yeah,
exactly. So this is now becoming this idea that we can now grow in a nonlinear way, and we call this concept the super evolution.
Right.
Simply thinking that we are gonna start seeing companies that are gonna be moving at a pace that we've never seen before, and that also industries.
That speaks also to the thesis of saying, we're seeing all these amazing technologies around us that are incredible, yet we're still in the infancy of deep technology, and where we're going to be headed with the way technology advances. There's still so much room to grow, which I think is fascinating. But one thing that I really want to grab a piece of your mind at, the traditional venture capital model, we're seeing companies, we're looking at pain points that are happening. We evaluate the way that the company is progressing towards their goal, their sales metrics, their engagement, and we're trying to estimate and project what's going to happen in the next quarter and month-over-month growth. We hear that a lot, right? I'm getting the sense that you're not looking as much at that as you are at, let's think down the line, and what does the company have to do in years worth of time in terms of the technology in order to bridge a bigger pain point? Right? It's a little bit of a different model of thinking for a venture capital fund.
I mean, I think for us, and I can't speak for all venture capital funds, I think it's always been the idea of how do we create positive change in the world through the investments that we make. And, you have to think about this as a very long-term process. So we're looking for those macro changes that would allow us to do things completely differently. This exponential change, exponential impact, both financial impact, obviously, as a venture capital firm, but also human impact of things that would drive big changes in the world. So we've been less excited about companies that, consumer internet companies that are changing, incrementally becoming the next Facebook or Twitter or TikTok or whatever, and sort of more interested in how do we how do we think about the new space industry, right? What kind of things would be possible now that those technologies are coming to play? And we've had a lot of different conclusions, I guess. And maybe I'll try to synthesize some of that and share my thinking about what do I think the next decade would look like, to your point. So few learnings that we've had over this period of time and how we're thinking about this, how we're thinking about the future. So the first insight we've had is that the hypothesis that we've initially tested is actually working, and
from 10 years ago.
For 10 years ago, yeah. So basically, we're starting to see it's working now, as in the sense that we're seeing companies that we're seeing big companies that have been created in industries that even a decade ago, just over a decade ago, have been considered untouchable. We're seeing that in companies such as Uber, which was one of our early portfolio companies, which is a great example, I think, for a company that completely changed the way we're thinking about transportation, right? And they've been working in an industry that very few people thought at the time you would be able to change it, right? Because of regulation, because of a million different things. And here you had the company that was maybe one of the fastest growing companies in history that completely changed the way we're thinking about moving things around. Similarly, with companies in the space industry that I mentioned earlier, so thinking about Planet, one of our companies just about to go public, that took a completely new approach to the satellite industry, right? And again, this is an industry where satellites would sometimes take a decade to build, would cost hundreds of millions of dollars, would be extremely heavy, weigh a few tons and so on. And thinking about what could be done differently now and how do we change this industry through a completely new architecture of a satellite, and then end up building a much smaller satellite, much cheaper one. So think about a satellite would cost maybe like an average car. It would be this size roughly, and we would be able to build it within weeks, build and launch it within weeks. And here we are just a few years later, they now operate one of the largest fleets of satellite in the world. They have I think they've launched over 400 satellites during this period of time. They have 200 currently in orbit. And most interestingly, they've built this capability through those imagery satellites to now image the entire world on a daily basis. Right? So completely changed the industry. Not only that, both Planet as well as Uber have created not only this role model for a lot of entrepreneurs that show them they can actually change those industries that nobody wanted to touch before, but also that you can do it at a time frame that allow you to grow a very big company through this sort of VC industry. And they're creating this platform, both talent platforms, but also technological platforms that others can use now to completely change what they have done over the last 10 years and do it faster than they have done that as well.
Right.
So we're starting to see this exponential phenomena happening. And again, for us, it's just a great proof that you can now change those industries. You can do it faster than everybody thought. And we think that actually over the next decade, we can do it even faster.
What is common to the founders? And this is going to be a selfish question because, one day I'm looking to build a company or several companies of my own. And, when I'm looking at the companies that you're backing, those are the types of problems that I, as an entrepreneur, want to wake up in the morning for. But I feel that it requires a personality and it requires some way of thinking that is a little bit different. Mm-hmm. What have you observed that has been successful amongst your founders in their way of thinking that enables them to go and pursue these crazy potential companies?
Yeah, one of the conclusions that we've had over this period of time is that those companies that we've backed and that have been successful are different than most companies we've done a decade before. Right? So what we are seeing there is that they are different in the sense that they usually start with a mission, and the founders are starting with a mission, and the mission is not to make a lot of money or to build a big company. The mission is to solve a very big problem that the world cares about, right? And I think increasingly the world cares about mission-driven companies because it does allow you to recruit better talent, does allow you to attract certain kind of investors, and so on and so forth. So I think it was sort of one interesting aspect of those founders that we've seen is just to start with a big vision, and it's usually sort of a mission-driven vision. The second thing is that that we've seen with those companies is that they tend to be multidisciplinary. So it's not as much of a single domain type of company that, if you want to start Facebook, sure, you have you're studying consumer engineering company, there is a certain type of talent you would want to hire for this company. But if you're starting a new company in the tech biospace, for example, and take my company, Eikon Therapeutics, for example, they had to assemble some of the best people in the world across so many different fields, right? You have some of the best biologists and some of the best chemists, but also you have some of the best computer scientists, roboticists, mechanical engineers, and so on.
Incredible.
All coming together to build a team that works. And those teams just tend to look very differently. So you sort of have to manage that kind of complexity, and the founders need to sign up for that.
Yeah.
And what I think a lot of those founders realize, I think the best founders, to your point, realize that really the best way for you to do it is to come up with a mission. So we need to hire all those people. Let's come up with a mission that will attract these people. And I think increasingly talent in the Silicon Valley and worldwide is attracted to solve those kind of to join those kind of mission-driven companies. They go beyond just we need a better salary or we need an intellectually stimulating environment. They also want to solve a big problem, so they tend to join. And also, I think those founders tend to hire the right kind of executives earlier on. So it's to sort of manage that complexity. So we see this looking at some of my companies that have really hired well. It's something that they tend to do very quickly, and they tend to hire some of the best people in the world way ahead of the time that they should hire those people. But they tend to they can get them excited, and they have them join very early in the journey.
Was this always the plan for you, to look at the world, with the wide lens, 5-10 years ahead, and be at the forefront of trying to solve some of the most difficult problems? Like, if you look back at your army days, even at the GSB, is this who Dror was back then as well?
I don't think so. I think that I was always the type of person that was curious and interested in the world and trying to explore, since I was a kid. And I think about my military and sort of other things. I think I was always the type that pushed myself to the best I could. So whether it was the army unit that I chose, whether it's coming to the degree I did in Ben-Gurion University or the degree I did in Stanford. But I think it was really only here at Stanford when I went through my MBA that when I graduated, and I remember this was in one of the courses when we did a sort of a synthesis class to sort of synthesize a lot of the learnings that we have had over the past couple of years at Stanford. Sort of came to the conclusion that now, or at that time, I had different capabilities. I've built my capabilities to change the world. Maybe I know it sounds it's sort of maybe audacious or naive or whatnot, but sort of felt like
the work speaks for itself.
Given that I was here, given the amazing amount of people and talent that was here, was possible, right? I saw the people coming to my class and talking about the companies they've built. It's like, they're not that different than me. I could do all those things. And in some ways also felt that I was responsible to do that, or it was my responsibility to actually step up and think about my life goal and think about fulfillment, think about, what would make me fulfilled by the time I'm 90 or 100 or whatnot, to just think about the things that I've done. So I felt like I was responsible, given that I was taking maybe the place of somebody else who could have been in Stanford and would go out and do those kind of things. So I think that sort of put me on a trajectory to understand the confidence and have the sense of responsibility to pursue those kind of big ideas.
Do you still have that weight on your shoulder right now today? One of the leaders of innovation endeavors, with the incredible team that you have with Sam and Harpy and Scott and Eric. And do you feel as you're walking down the street or you're talking to your kids at home and your wife that you have a responsibility to fulfill for the world?
I do. I feel like it's, I think, especially given that since then I've had kids and I can see, and talking about what we've experienced here over the last year, from COVID to the horrible fires around here, I do feel that I'm in an extremely fortunate position to affect a change. And I think it's time to actually, for all of us, not just me, to think about how do we improve the world and how do we live a better place after us. And again, I'm an optimist, so I'm not deterred by all these things that we are seeing around us, and mostly think about positively is how do how do we do more? And, I can play a role in that by catalyzing more growth, by catalyzing more startups or more visionary founders that have the right idea, and where I can partner with them, or we can partner with them as a team and support them through this process. So I feel that that's a responsibility, but also, to be honest, it's also fun. It's not that I'm carrying a big weight on my shoulders and sort of I feel sad about it. I think it's amazing. I've been so excited to do what I do. I would say that it took me a long time to understand if I'm actually good at it, and I'm still sort of figuring it out, to be honest. But it's it's been a fun process, and by now I feel like I have more of a sense of where can I be effective as an investor, as somebody who runs this firm, and how do we build more and do more of that. But I'm really enjoying it. I mean, the companies that I get to work with are amazing, and I think this is an incredible job for people who like to work with a lot of different things. This is just, I can start my morning with one of my quantum computing companies, Atom Computing, that is completely changing the world and the way we're thinking about what we could do with compute, to Eikon Therapeutics, where I'm spending time with a Nobel Prize winner and people who are building a super resolution microscope that allow us to understand biology in a completely different way than we understand it today. So essentially, looking into real living cells and see the way proteins are moving, engaging with each other, and build a drug discovery company based on that. All the way to Planet, who just have I just got a mail for them. They're celebrating 10 years next week, and again, they've built an amazing company that has now become one of the most important satellite companies in the world. But they also help the imagery that they create help us now catch illegal deforestation activities in different places around the world, illegal fishing activities, and so on. So all those things are coming together for me, just to be very proud and very excited about what I'm doing.
I'm looking at all the examples that you're giving, and many more portfolio companies that are coming into mind immediately. And I think what's also common to them is the fact that they're not just doing one thing, that they're developing some technology, or they're solving some pain point. The ripple effect is, we can't even imagine what's going to happen. You're mentioning a few use cases for Planet or for Eikon or for Atom Computing, but really they're changing the way we interact with technology and enablement for others to then go and use that technology to continue affecting positive change in their own domain. And I think that is just simply incredible. Yeah. And I think that it's just a really crazy privilege.
No, it's very true. I mean, all those companies I mentioned essentially become the platform for change for the next generation of companies.
Right.
And that's why we're so excited about the next 10 years, because we recognize that a lot of those, as I mentioned, Uber and Planet, as some examples, have now created the technological platforms for others to use. That's one aspect. They've shown that this could be done. A lot of the technologies that I mentioned earlier on instrumentation, compute, and robotics are increasingly accelerating pace in a way we can do completely different things that we could do 10 years ago. And I think of the next 10 years, the pace of change will just increase. So we're going to have significantly better capabilities across all those domains, right? And a lot of my companies are actually creating these kind of advances, and then they share it with the world such that others can build on them, and so on and so forth. And then I think that as you see more success, those become, again, platforms and role models for a lot of other people who want to start and do the same kind of thing. So I'm incredibly excited about what's to come. And again, I think that the platform we've built and the platform our companies have built would allow us to do so much more over the next decade. So that's awesome.
To the super evolution.
Thank you. Super evolution.
Toda rabba. This was amazing. Thank you for hosting me here. Thank you for the inspiration, more than anything. The post that you wrote about also when Amir Shabbat joining, and the anecdotes about how you're going on hikes, and part of the inspiration that you're gathering also is from the conversations that you're having with those around you, talking about how different technologies are going to push change in our lives, and having that be just an instrumental part of your daily life. That's something that I wish for myself. I can't think of a greater privilege and more fulfillment. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I would just say that it takes a village. So what I recognize early on is that as much as I may be smart, and I think comparatively here, I'm probably not very smart, it's really
You have some amazing people around you.
it's really about the people around you, and I try to surround myself with a lot of amazing people, and I've been very lucky to build this community that I like around here and also in Israel, where I can talk to a lot of very smart people, understand what they are seeing and how they view the world, because it's those people, it's a lot of times entrepreneurs that are always really at the trenches, you know, the cutting edge of the network. You're always a step behind them, but trying to take all this information and see how do we help them and what can we learn so we can affect a better future. And I would also say that Eric Schmidt has been an amazing part of it as well, you know, from his vantage point and the things that he's seeing and the way that he's influencing us or encourages us to pursue and maybe double down on a lot of that vision. It's just been an amazing opportunity for me personally to see all that and then synthesize all that and then build innovation for us to keep investing and partnering with entrepreneurs.
Amazing. Toda.